welcome to Economically Speaking, the podcast where policy meets reality and we break down the big economic moves shaping Nigeria's future. I'm your host, Faiza Sanni, and today we're diving into a landmark reform shaking up Nigeria's oil and gas sector, the Cost Efficiency Incentives Order of 2025. It's about reducing Nigeria's sky-high oil production costs, making our energy sector leaner, cleaner, and more competitive. But what does this mean for oil companies, contractors, workers, and yes, you? To unpack this, we have Chinaza and Nwagwu, the outgoing SRP chief editor. Thank you so much for coming to shed light on this order.
Thank you for having me.
So to start us off, let's get our basics straight. For those who haven't read the fine print, what exactly is this cost efficiency incentives order in plain English, and what's the big idea about it and how does it work?
Okay, so the cost efficiency incentive order is basically a presidential order done specifically to encourage companies in the upstream sector of the Nigerian petroleum sector to reduce their costs. So basically, companies that are successfully able to be efficient in their costs are able to benefit from tax credits. So the big deal about it is that the oil sector is a major source of revenue for the Nigerian sector. So if we're able to reduce costs, revenue would obviously increase, which is a good thing.
So what made government to act now? Was there a breaking point? What straw finally broke the camel's back?
Okay, so first of all, Nigeria produces oil very expensive. Countries like Saudi Arabia spend about $10 to produce a barrel. Nigeria spends $20 to $30, which is almost 2 times or 3 times, what. So this makes our products less competitive in the global market, right? So this means that investors are not incentivized to invest in our local oil sector. So, and as we all know, there have been multiple international events that has been shaking the oil industry. So because of the fact that we produce at such a high cost, we are more liable or more vulnerable to the effects. So things like the Russia-Ukraine war, the current tariffs happening. So we're more vulnerable to the effects of this. So if we're able to successfully reduce cost of producing oil, we will be less vulnerable, which is
Okay, wow. So to help us visualize this order, how does the CEI formula work in practice, and what's in it for the oil companies?
Okay, so the CEI formula is cost savings times reference tax rate times 50%. So, cost savings. What's cost savings? So every year, the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission (NUPRC) they set a benchmark for costs. So, for example, let's say they can set a benchmark to this year 2025 that companies should only produce oil. Companies should produce oil at less than $25 per barrel. So if a company were able to, produce at $20 per barrel, it means that their cost figures will be $5 per barrel, right? Now the reference tax rate is basically the tax rates companies are liable to. So in Nigeria, our corporate income tax is 30%. Yes. Then 50% is like a cap. So basically, the formula is cost savings, which would this fictional company would be $5 times 30% times 50%. I think that's about 1.25. So that means the company is entitled to $1.25 per barrel, like tax rate of 1.25. So let's say, let's imagine that the company produces 10 million barrels. So 10 million times 1.25, that would be 12.5 million naira. So dollars. So that would be $12.5 billion. So let's say the company was supposed to pay a tax of about, this year they're supposed to pay a tax of $15 million. They can remove 12. Because they can't remove 12 because there's a 20% cap. So another thing, you can't go beyond 20% of the tax you're supposed to pay for the year. So I think 12.5 million is higher. So let's say they're supposed to pay $100 million. They can remove $12.5 million out of it because that's less than 20% cap, which is $20 million. But they're still saving. They're not paying $12.5 million in tax, which is a good thing for them.
Yeah, $1.25 might seem like a small number when we're talking about barrels, but the amount of number of barrels that are being produced daily, we can see that when the number is multiplied, is actually a lot of money, a lot of tax credit for these oil companies. So this order, how do we expect the industry players to respond? How would oil companies adjust their internal systems, spending strategies to meet these new cost efficiency targets?
The baseline will be they will have to find a way to innovate because the order specifies that cost savings practices like just firing off workers or like reducing CSR will not count as cost saving for the government. So basically, this order is specifying that for you to earn this tax credits, you have to, genuinely in an ethical manner reduce your costs of production. And this most likely to be done via technology improvement and innovation. So what companies will have to do is to improve their technology and also find ways to innovate.
So does this shift squeeze out smaller local contractors? Is this order only focused on the big players, or are the small little players also involved in this order?
It helps everybody, to be honest. Is I would liken it to the banking sector, right? Then we have like things like microfinance banks and fintechs who don't need as much cost as traditional banks. So the same thing. That's the same way it would affect smaller players in the market because as long as you are able to innovate and be cost efficient, you are benefiting. So that means that the baseline is not a particular amount of capital and stuff like that. It is basically do you have like the technology necessary to be able to innovate to meet this cost target? If yes, then you are free to.
Where do you see opportunities for tech and automation solutions under this reform? Could this order turbocharge innovation in the oil field?
Okay, definitely. So I see opportunity because first of all, this order requires is a lot of monitoring, right? So things like platforms that involve that help with like monitoring, costs and those things like would be needed. So like I feel like there's going to be a lot of demand in STEM sectors. So that's technology, science, and stuff. So yes, there are opportunities in that.
So this order isn't just about oil. It has ripple effects throughout the entire economy.
Yes.
If the order works as it is intended to do so, how could it impact Nigeria in terms of exchange rate stability, foreign reserves, or inflation?
Okay. So basically, if we were able to, because the offshore sector is the beginning part of it, right? So those are people that are involved in drilling and oil exploration. So if we're able to reduce costs in the upstream sector, the downstream sector will benefit from like reduction in like prices. So this means that consumers like you and I, we would not have to face high pricing of fuel and other products from oil, right? So that would help us, and that would help reduce inflation because we don't see because like price of fuel is one of the drivers of inflation. So by reducing that, which is a good thing, then it also increases government revenue. So when you reduce costs, oil prices are beyond our control, so they are relatively stable-ish. So that means government revenue is increasing, right? So that means government have more. They're able to like engage in more capital expenditure, current expenditure, and stuff like that, which is beneficial for the economy as a whole. Additionally, it would help boost our exchange rates. Like we see now the naira is actually stable, but like we like the naira has depreciated in these past 2 years. So it will help with that. Yes, it will help with our exchange rate depreciation, and it will also give us more revenue to place in our FX reserve because our revenue is in form of foreign currency. So which if we increase our reserve, which means that when shocks in the global economy occur, we are less vulnerable.
So we're talking about the entire economy. Do we expect to see spillover effects in other sectors that work with the oil field, like logistics, manufacturing, or even startups? Could this boost Nigeria's industrial base?
It could, right? Because one of the challenges manufacturing firms or industrial firms in Nigeria face is high cost of generating power. So majority of all these manufacturers they use fuel for generators or diesel, which are all oil products. So if we're able to reduce the cost and thus reduce the price that these companies are demanding for it, we're also reducing the cost for these people. So fuel for buses, the price would reduce. Same thing goes with Same thing goes with diesel for generators, like those prices will reduce. So these are the spillover effects, right? There's going to be like an overall, if done well, there's going to be an overall reduction in the cost of oil products, which is beneficial for everybody that uses oil products.
Yeah,
Which is
everybody.
everybody.
Exactly. So there's a real concern about cutting costs, meaning cutting jobs,
Oh,
right? So how do we balance this efficiency with community protection?
okay. So again, one of my favorite aspects of this order is the fact that it was specific in what it meant by cost savings. So it was specific in saying that just firing workers does not count. Same thing with cutting CSR activities. So the only problem now is how do we monitor this? So this is where the government has to play a huge role. They have to ensure that when these companies say that we've cut costs, this is what the cost the government recommended is what they are cutting down. So I already know that the NUPRC is going to work in line with the FIRS to ensure that the costs that are being cut down are exactly what. So basically, the balance is that we have to monitor and ensure that what's like it's not ethical. All forms of cost cutting are ethical, basically.
Okay, so talking about the youth now, talking about ourselves.
Okay.
This isn't a youth policy, but it still matters to us.
Okay.
What skills do you think will be in high demand as companies chase efficiency?
And so definitely people in STEM, like people with STEM associated skills are going to benefit, right? So as I stated earlier, we need platforms for monitoring and evaluation. These are things people that can code, people that project managers and stuff can do. So, but beside that, this order calls for thinking outside the box. It calls for being innovative. So that's basically it. Like for youngsters, youth in those spaces, I would say that they should read more, research more, and hopefully they can have their big break.
Yeah, hopefully. So do you see new spaces for youth-led SMEs to plug into this oil supply chain, especially with inflated pricing under pressure?
Definitely, because this cost efficiency order, it benefits everybody that can cut costs. So youth-led SMEs, as long as they are able to engage in activities that cut costs towards the targeted cost, they are able to benefit from this. So another thing is that it also disincentivizes inflated pricing activities, because you are no longer you are basically being punished if you engage in such behavior. So when this is like when such activities are disincentivized, it opens up the space for more competition, and youth-led SMEs will thrive in more competition.
Okay, so we know that efficient policies all hinge on effective governance.
Okay.
So why did governments decide to use tax credits as an incentive instead of subsidies for this order?
Okay. So tax credits are just more efficient. First of all, they are very specific. The government has already specified that every year would give you a benchmark cost, and you have to be below it. That is straightforward.
Yeah.
Another thing is subsidies are usually given upfront, but tax credits only happen. You only benefit from tax credits if you meet the requirements. So it means that there's less opportunities for corruption, wastage, and stuff like that. Then it's just more sustainable in a fiscal sense, because subsidies are outrightly coming from government pockets. But tax credits are just like, okay, we could have collected this, but we're no longer collecting it. So it's more sustainable for the government, especially in the long run. And also, Nigeria has a history of subsidies, and we saw that it didn't necessarily work. Like, of course, like the removal of subsidies affected like the mass a lot. But something that a lot of people don't know, or I feel like we should know, is that subsidies benefited the top 1% more than it benefited the rest of Nigerians. So so it basically didn't work. So we have a history with subsidies. So like choosing to use subsidies after a history of it not working, it's not.
I think tax credits are very direct. They're very objective, while subsidies are just all over the place. So how critical is strong institutional capacity capacity to make this order work? You mentioned a lot about monitoring.
Yeah.
How does it affect this order?
Okay, so it affects it a lot because basically, for this order to work, we have to make sure that the cost saving activities of these companies are ethical, right? This means that they're not firing workers and then putting it there as cost savings.
Yeah.
So the regulatory bodies, the NUPRC and the FIRS, they need to be top of the game when it
Yeah.
comes to monitoring these companies' accounts. So that's basically the thing that can make or break this initiative or can affect its ability to work is that we are able to effectively and efficiently, so we have to also reduce the cost of regulatory practices. So we're able to effectively monitor their books and stuff then.
Yeah, effectiveness of the government is very key to efficient policies. Thank you so much. So to wrap up this insightful discussion, in one sentence, what's the most important change this order could bring to Nigeria?
One sentence, it will increase our revenue and drive innovation. And innovation often has spillover effects to the economy, so that's really good.
Yeah, so it's going to benefit everybody.
Yes.
All in all. So can this efficiency model be replicated in other sectors like in power or in agriculture?
Definitely, because what this sector is seeking is, cut down costs and we would grant you tax credits.
Yeah.
So I think it's also work especially in like sectors that are majorly private because the private companies are the ones chasing profit.
Yeah.
So it will definitely work. It's a good policy because it's rewarding efficient practices with tax credits.
Okay, so what's one piece of advice you would like to give policymakers, companies, or ordinary citizens watching right now in light of this reform?
I think we should all just like think outside the box because that's basically what this order is rewarding. It's rewarding the ability to think, the ability to innovate, whether process innovation, product innovation, etc. So it's rewarding us. So we should all just think outside the box. With regulators especially, they need to be up to, because remember they still have to set a benchmark. So they need to be up to date on on the things that would affect such a benchmark. So
That is for today's episode of Economically Speaking. A big thanks to our guest Chinaza and to you, our listeners. We've explored how the cost efficiency incentives order could reshape Nigeria's oil sector and maybe even the broader economy. But now it's your turn. The road to reform is long, but understanding it is the first step. Are you a student, an entrepreneur, or an industry professional? What opportunities do you see in a more efficient oil and gas sector? Join the conversation on all our platforms and tell a friend who's working in oil and gas sector or thinking about Nigeria's future. Until next time, I'm Faiza Sanni and this is Economically Speaking.